In the workplace, though, when we're talking about resources, we're talking about time and money and equipment. So this is much more tangible. And in the workplace, the relationships that are characterized by low trust, they cost more. Things get done slower.
Welcome to the Point of View Show. My name's Andrew Tran. I'm your host. This show highlights business professionals in Asia and around the world to get an understanding on what makes them effective, how they do it, and advice to help you grow in leadership, branding, marketing, and sales. For more information, head over to my website, www.andrewtran.asia. Before we get into it, smash that subscribe button and click notifications whether or not you're listening or watching this. It helps me a ton and it helps other like-minded people find these episodes a lot easier. Now let's get on with the show. My next guest is Dr. Brian Harman. He's an executive coach and leadership professor based in Los Angeles, California, USA. He teaches around the world at top universities, and his work on trust in the field of leadership psychology has been featured on Forbes and in peer-reviewed academic journals. When he isn't teaching, Brian is consulting with top brands with his group, Business Management Hallmark. And you can also see a ton of his work on his LinkedIn profile and his collaborations through other business professionals on the platform as well. Our chat centered around the theme of trust, and I really want to dive in and ask him about what is trust, why is it important in a workplace, and more importantly, like how would you actually start that conversation of trust to develop that culture within an organization as well. And I kind of dive a little bit into his work and what he kind of does as well. Without further ado, give it up for Dr. Brian Harman. Dr. Brian Harman, how you going?
Man, thank you for having me.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And for anyone who's watching or listening at home, we're recording. I'm recording in the morning. You're recording at night. So you were just telling me off camera you've just had like a 14, 15-hour day working on site, and we're just kind of connecting before about how we find that it's so, even though it is a little bit taxing on our energy, it's so energizing to at the same degree, working face to face with someone and having that human to human contact. So yeah, that's really good. So thank you so much for coming on board. Hey, first thing, like for anyone who's watching or listening who is new to you, tell us a little bit about like how you got into coaching in the first place, man.
It's a sad, sad story, actually. So I was searching for my passion. I found myself as a professor of leadership at UC Berkeley and UCLA, trying to figure out what's the gift that I have to give to the world. What is the thing that I am equipped and capable and competent of helping others with? And through a series of medical issues and a series of mental breakdowns and rebirth of me and my personality, my character, my purpose over the course of, this is like a 4 or 5 year thing. I finally found this place where I love my job. I love everything that I do. I feel very fortunate and privileged to do this kind of work. And that's the path, that's the exact same path and leadership journey that I take my clients through.
Nice. And, we're talking about, like, obviously the theme today is about leadership, but you kind of, I liked how, in the last few series that you're kind of pushing out is around trust, right? And so for those who are watching or listening, just really basic, like, what is trust?
So by definition, trust is a reciprocal emotion, much like a smile or laughter. When someone gives it to you, you want to give it back. And this happens because of a very biological function that happens in our bodies that we're actually not that much in control of. So when I'm talking and interacting with someone like you that has some gift to give to the world, and I do as well, the best way for us to maximize our influence with each other is by building relational trust there. So the only way that I'm going to get that back from you is if I give it to you first. And so my mission in a lot of the conversations that I have is, how can I do that? What is the thing that I can do that will relate with them on some level, whatever that might be?
Right. And I think you kind of alluded it just before, but when it comes to trust, why is it so important in the workplace?
Because we can't live some healthy, wealthy, well-balanced life and then go to this job that we hate. What researchers have found over the course of the last 20 to 30 years is that the vertical trust, that's the trust between employees and supervisors, this is what's lacking. This is at the very core, the very foundation of this issue that is keeping the global workforce from being engaged. We're actively checked out from our work. We're mentally just like, I don't like what I'm doing in the workplace. This isn't a new thing. We've all had bad bosses. Why is that the case? It's because we don't trust them. And sadly, that is like the core emotion of what makes things work. If you talk about the economics of trust, in a high trust team, cost goes down and speed goes up. In a low trust team, cost goes up and speed goes down. So trust is this core element. When we hear these buzzwords like equality, diversity, inclusion, all anyone's really talking about is trust. So that's why it's important in the workplace. Is it is a foundational element that is at the core of every social interaction that we make.
Yeah, I like how you just put that point where it's more expensive when there isn't trust than there is when there is trust. And, you know, really, like, a lot of my audiences are, you know, C-levels, C-suites, decision makers. And, you know, quite often there's a high turnover rate, especially when you look at smaller startup businesses where they're just churning and burning quite a lot. And they don't necessarily realize that even though you might be in a place of abundance in terms of work people or skill sets, it's really hard to train them, bring them into your team, assimilate them into your culture, and then kind of get them up and running. And typically, like, I think there's research out there that kind of says, like, it typically takes between 4 to 6 weeks for a new employee to be fully assimilated, or to be assimilated enough so that they're actually, you know, workable or capable of doing the function of which they've been employed to kind of do. So yeah, I totally agree when it comes to trust. It's so important.
Andrew, I'll ask you this, is like, this abstract idea that I'm talking about is very academic and very broad, but just think about it in terms of your everyday relationships. If you're in some type of intimate relationship with anyone, and that relationship is founded on this basis of high trust, self-love, high trust, what happens is, you can think of, in a relationship personally, it's emotional resources. So if me and my wife have high trust, things get done faster and more efficiently. Less emotional resource goes to these daily tactical things. In the workplace, though, when we're talking about resources, we're talking about time and money and equipment. So this is much more tangible. And in the workplace, the relationships that are characterized by low trust, they cost more. Things get done slower. You also would want to know that there is no such thing as a high trust organization. It does not exist today. There is a high trust team. There might be a high trust department or project-led team or multifunction team that's based on shared purpose. But what happens is, nobody knows how to build trust. This is not something we're trained on in school. No one else goes to, like, I wouldn't say wasted. I spent a lot of years trying to understand what is trust, what are the levels, dimensions, scales of trust, all these things. And even I'm still just barely touching the surface. So how can an everyday leader be challenged with this complex idea of, go build trust with everyone so we can get things done faster and cheaper? This is a hard question to answer. It's not easy.
Right. Well, I mean, I was going to ask you actually, like, you know, with your research, with your work, with a ton of clients over the years, when it comes to leaders that you work with or organizational heads that you work with, how do you actually start that conversation of building trust?
I like to think of it in the life cycle of any new relationship. What I mean by that is a handshake. There's one way to do a handshake, and then there's the high trust way to do a handshake. So if you're meeting someone for the first time, you know, this handshake that feels really good, the one that it's kind of a little heavy. You catch the eye contact. You even glaze into their eyes for enough seconds to get the color of their eye. Not like blue or green, but like light blue, deep blue, sky blue. Those are the types of tiny little nuances that you need from the pressure that you apply, from do you put their finger on the bloodline or not? If you want to burst oxytocin, grab the bloodline. Is your heart facing their heart? Are you parallel to each other or are you angled? What's your general stature? So these are like the tiny little things that can turn any old interaction into a high trust interaction. And it requires you to break down at a detailed, articulate level. What am I doing? Am I actually building trust in this handshake, or am I just letting it happen? And this is why building trust takes such a conscious effort. It's like living in the moment 3.0.
Right. Well, I don't know. That to me, that's like, damn, I want to do this now. Like Brian, if someone was to kind of reach out to people like yourself in terms of, you know, organizational kind of leadership and thought leadership in this space, like take us through a day. Like typically, how would you kind of interact with them? Like, how do you onboard like a new client, for instance, and kind of build that trust through that handshake?
So there's a couple kinds of clients that I work with. Most are in two categories. The CEO founder who has had a lot of success in building a business and growing the business through product related efforts. So maybe there's a novel technology, maybe they were really good at developing some type of a website, whatever it is. I want to help them to turn their next big win into a people win, a leadership win, taking the capacity of all their employees and leveling them all up. And this takes a lot of one-on-one coaching. I also do breakout groups and group coaching and corporate training and entire annual curriculum for leadership development for corporations of all sizes. I like the small companies because these are the ones where I become an arm of the business and I'm watching them grow and I know everyone on a first name basis. And when I walk in the room, it's hellos and high fives all around. That's the really the sweet spot for me, is the CEO founder of the smaller firm, 50 to 150 headcount. The other type of individual that I work with the most is the senior executive of a large multinational firm has an expansive organization beneath them. And they're just like, hey, I've plateaued. I've made it to SVP. I don't know how I can get more out of my influence, my level of action. I'm productive, but I'm also strategic, but can I get my team to employ more inspiration and trust into their work? So yeah, that's an average day for me, is just a lot of one-on-one work. Wow. And then sprinkled in with some group work.
Nice.
A lot of executive retreats too. So just in the last 4 weeks, I think I've done 6 executive retreats.
Wow. Okay. That's cool. That's really cool. And obviously you've got a big team. Well, you've got a team behind you that supports you along your journey from a business perspective as well. So that's really cool. So look, like wrapping up, final question for me is and I think you've kind of alluded it in like the conversations we've just kind of had before answering the questions, was, you know, if you had to talk to a CEO or an exec and you had to talk to them about building trust as a culture within either their entire company or within their or department head, like what are some tips that you might, you know, for those who are listening and watching, might be able to deploy within, you know, their said groups?
It's important that we all understand that the same way that you can't love other people from an empty well, the self-love is the first step in being in a healthy marriage or relationship or friendship even. Same thing goes with trust. Is you start with self-trust, then you go to interpersonal trust, then social trust, then community trust, then organizational trust, national, institutional, and global trust. It scales up. And as you scale up, what we know for sure is that leadership matters the more and more you grow the numbers. Leave it to say though, self-trust is the beginning of that. So here's an example I like to use is, if I'm going to keep a promise to myself, that's one stage. if I'm going to make a promise to myself, declare it to other people, and now they hold me accountable as well, that's self-trust to the max. If I can't do that, then I'm in no place to be making trust promises and keeping promises and being reliant to other people. So this is like that idea and theory that you have to self-trust first and then build up from there and go one by one out. We all know what it feels like to be around people that you don't trust. You close down, you cross your arms, you tighten down your chin. You want to protect your carotid arteries, your jugular vein, your cranial vagus nerves. This is like a natural human instinct. And we know that the people who are trustworthy, these are the people that light up a room. These are the people that they've done some work on themselves. They can trust themselves. They make promises. They keep promises to themselves and to other people. And now that keeps to spread this sort of feeling of trust and oxytocin throughout a bigger group and bigger group and bigger group. I think we have to trust our gut, but we first also have to say, what am I doing about my own self-trust? That's the biggest advice I would give to leaders.
Right. And is there any books that you probably recommend that they should take a squiz at when it comes to building trust that comes off the top of your head?
Yeah, the two best in the field of trust are The Trust Factor by Dr. Paul Zak, who I've spoken to. He's a brilliant man. He's done a lot of work in this field. He's dedicated his entire life to it. So it's called The Trust Factor by Dr. Paul Zak out of Claremont University. The second one is by the famous Stephen Covey's son, also Stephen Covey. It's called The Speed of Trust. Those two books in particular, if you read those, I mean, I read each of those once a year. This is like a pinnacle of what I do. These two books are what inspired me to get involved in this field to begin with. So I would highly recommend both of those.
Great. And for those who are watching or listening, I'll put them in the show notes below. Brian, thank you so much. For anyone that wants to reach out to you, what are the best channels to reach out to you by?
Definitely LinkedIn. Dr. Brian Harman on LinkedIn. I'm there every day. I like to respond to my own comments, emails, all that kind of stuff. So I'll see you there. Thank you for having me, Andrew. It was absolutely my pleasure to spend some time with you.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. And for anyone who's watching or listening, thank you so much. And I'll see you on the next show.